Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these two knives right here. This is the ESEE Avispa up top here, and down here is the ESEE Zancudo down here. And so these are very interesting knives. I know that some of you are already thinking, well, Nick, wait, hold on, I smell a rat. Because these two knives do look very, very similar to the Ontario Rat series. Up here is the rat number 1, and where is the rat number 2? It's around here somewhere. Here we go. Here is the rat number 2. The reason for this similarity is that actually they were designed by the same people. In both cases, Randall's Adventure Training, the RAT, the rat in Rat 1 and Rat 2, made these designs. But after they broke with Ontario Knife Company, the RAT moved on to becoming ESEE knives, ESEE. And then they're just to avoid the confusion of everything. But anyways, these knives are actually brothers from the same father, if you will. And so that's why they look so similar. By the way, size comparison. Right here, these guys are against your Ontario Rat number 1 and Rat number 2. And you can see here that in terms of, well, pretty much everything, they're very, very similar in size and shape. So there you go. And then, of course, wouldn't be my channel if I didn't compare against the Spyderco, which is much more in the range of the little Zancudo here. So there you go. Next thing, the names here is Avispa is actually Spanish word for wasp, and Zancudo is the Spanish word for a mosquito. And so that's where the names are coming from. And then finally, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and review these guys jointly because, like I said, there are a lot of similarities here. But I'm also going to do a separate review where I talk about the differences and similarities between these two guys, the Ontario Rat number 1 and Rat number 2, as well as the steel wheel cut jacks in the 3.5 and 3-inch size, because I think these offer a very compelling set of pairs that one should always be thinking about as they're going for things. Buying knives, that is. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly here. Okay, so on the good side, first off, a couple of details. This guy, both of these guys actually have internal liners, which means that underneath this black plastic or maybe G10 resin material, they have a steel liner sitting there underneath. This just gives a little bit of extra added stiffness and just makes the knives feel a little bit more, I don't know, burly in the hand. And so that's kind of a nice thing. If you're looking at that and thinking, well, half of it's plastic, well, no, it isn't. And actually, if this is G10, that doesn't really matter anyways. But that's nice to see. Next thing, just like on the Rat series, the thumb studs here are outside of the slicing path, and this is a beautiful underrated thing, because here this means that you can cut as deep as you'd like on this blade without ever getting to the thumb stud, and I appreciate that very, very much. Next thing, the prices on these guys are both very, very good. You're looking at a $35 price tag for your Zancudo here, and $40 for the Avispa. Considering that these are, fully made, reasonably well-made knives in D2 steel, I think that's pretty acceptable, and it puts them very firmly up against those other knives in the same department, the Rats as well as the cut jacks. So I think that's a good price point to come in at. Next thing I gotta say, I do very much appreciate the clips on these guys are good. You've got plenty of ramp to them, which is nice, and they're also very long, which helps to make sure these guys stay in the pocket, which is great. And speaking of the pocket, that is really where these guys shine, and that is in some ways their biggest advantage over the other competition, is that because these guys are relatively thin, let's see, hold it up next to the Rat 1, Rat 2 here. You can see that this guy is thinner. The Zancudo is thinner on a pretty good margin than the Rat 2, and similarly, in fact, even more so, compared to the Rat 1. You've got a lot more thinness going on here, and what that basically means is that these two carry a lot more nicely than the Rat series do, and certainly more nicely than the cut jacks do with their big old freaking pocket peckers hanging off the back of that. And so these knives were absolutely great in the pocket, particularly this little guy. I did enjoy carrying it a fair amount, and this little flattened off area in the top here, it carries beautifully. I'm a big fan of that. You can see it's kind of designed to hang back. So in the pocket, these guys are absolutely great. There were a couple of good details in here. For instance, both of these have a sharpening choil. Not a huge sharpening choil, but certainly enough, and not going to be a super snaggy one. But, and then this guy has a 4-way clip. This guy only has a 2-way clip, but, hey, whatever. So that is, to me at least, what's good about these guys, is that they are very thin in the pocket, which is nice. They have nice clips. They have very good price points for $35 and $40. Can't argue with that too much. The thumb studs are out of the slicing path, and both of these have an internal liner underneath the plastic here. So let's talk about what's great about these guys. Okay, to me, what is great about these knives, 100%, is the blades. The blades here, to start with, they're made of a great steel. D2 is absolutely good to go. A little less rust-resistant than some, but it is just fine. These have not rusted after a fair amount of time in storage. It took me a long time to get around to this review. But anyways, they're A-okay steels, absolutely great. I like the fact that they are reasonably thin behind the edge, so both of these will actually cut, which is nice. They're using respectably thin blade stock here, which is good. You're not getting stupidly thick stock, and you're getting nice, tall, flat grinds on these guys. And then they're getting sharpening choils on both, and then the shape of these guys. I love this kind of a blade shape for a couple of reasons. You get a lot of flat area, which can be very good, but you also get this nice angled front surface, which can be very useful in a variety of ways. Get a nice multi-facet, you can push forward here and make these kinds of scraping cuts with this guy. It still has enough beef behind the tip for, to actually stab into like a bag of sand to open it up, things like that. This is just a great blade shape. I love this blade shape every time I see it, and so to me, 100%, the thing I absolutely like most about these knives are the blades. Let's talk about what's not so great, the bad, that is. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, both of these knives are replete with hot spots. Although the overall designs are fairly ergonomic, especially on the smaller one with this nice swell in the back here, it does go in the hand nicely. Having this big clip on here, especially with this ramp in the front, is not so great ergonomically speaking and leads to a major hot spot there. And then the big guy is even hot spottier because you've got this little area here, you've got this gap between these two here. You've also got the clip in there, and just this little area here where you have to disengage the frame lock, that part does stick up a fair amount. It's good that it does, but it is a hot spot, and so neither of these knives are terribly comfortable in the hand, and in both cases I would give the edge to the rats, pardon me, over these guys in terms of ergonomics. Next thing. Both of these guys, the lock side is very, very slippery. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not a knife that's going to come flying out of your hand in slick conditions. No, as you're actually cutting and using this guy, it's going to be fine. In both cases, it's got plenty of contouring that'll help to keep it in the hand regardless. But when you're manipulating this knife, a lot of the parts are very slippery. So, for instance, this area here, there is no texturing, there's no jimping. It's just trying to slide your finger up against that. And we'll talk about that later, but it is just, it's not great in that way. And similarly, as you're trying to just manipulate this guy, the back side of this guy is really slick, and it's just not great. And so that's something you're going to keep in mind, that although this is fine in your hand while you're using it in lubricated situations, if you will, manipulating it will not be straightforward. And then finally, both of these guys are actually heavier than you might expect. Bust out my little scale here, and both of these guys, because you've got the steel back, steel frame locks, which are always kind of heavy, as well as steel liners, the little guy comes in at 3.08 ounces, big guy comes in at 4.49 ounces. That's pretty beefy. And so if you're looking at these as lightweight carry, they're certainly small in the pocket, but they're still pretty heavy. And to me, at least, that's what's bad about these guys, is that they are both pretty heavy. The lock side on both is pretty slick, and they both have lots of hot spots, which mean they're not just great in the hand. Let's talk about what's ugly here. Okay, so first off, on the ugly side, on both of these guys, disengaging the frame lock is not a super pleasant process. You can see here that they've given us a little bit of a stick up above the liner on the other side, which makes this possible. But especially on this big guy, you have a lot of lock bar tension here, which they've bent into this just to try and make it lock up, which is just not great. And then unlocking it is a process of putting a great deal of force this way onto basically, it looks like they've put a slight rounding, a chamfer on it, but onto basically a 90-degree angle. It's not super, I don't like it. And especially compared to a nice low attention liner lock here on the Rat 1, or the Rat 2 for that matter, this frame lock approach, and especially steel frame lock, just doesn't work so well for me. And so steel frame locks are hard to get right, and I don't really feel like these are well dialed in. The other thing that makes me say that is that, well, unfortunately, these just aren't well dialed in overall. The build quality on either of these is just not great. For instance, on the Zancudo, the blade is actually slightly warped. If you put it in there, I mean, it looks like it's plenty centered on one side, but then on the other side, it comes right over to this, and so I was completely unable to repair the centering on this guy, no matter how much I tried. In fact, this was my test dummy for a video about how to fix centering. And then on this guy, it's similarly, you've got some little fit and finish fouls here that are just not impressing me. But the biggest one of all, and the thing that is just ugly, is that this guy, well, there are three things that are just ugly, but is that this guy here has developed vertical blade play during the time that I have owned it. When I got it, it did not have it. Now that I've used it a little bit more, it has developed. It's very slight, mind you, and one often would characterize this as lock rock. It goes a little bit back and forth. The lock up is not super solid, but that's just not acceptable. I suspect that I could fix it, because if you really jam your finger in there, it will fix that issue. But the thing is, then the lock bar wants to pop back out, so I suspect if I put an even stronger bend in the lock bar, I could probably fix it. But no, that's not something that should be happening. And that just means that the build quality isn't quite up to snuff. And so overall, that's a bunch of ugly here, is that you've got this vertical blade play, which is just completely unacceptable, even in an inexpensive knife. If you're going to make it cheap, you need to at least make it good. Then you also have build quality issues overall, and then disengaging the frame lock on either one of these knives is not super pleasant, especially relative to the competition. So let's talk about the final conclusion here. Look, final conclusion here. These knives are decent choices, 100%. The blades on them are great, and I would love to see this exact blade put onto other knives, specifically your Rat series. This is a great blade, 100%, and it is nice to see some variety on the lower end. We are very happy, I think we should be very happy as a community, to have a bunch of these very nice, reasonably sized, lower end knives in decent steels now. That's absolutely excellent, and so I love seeing this guy existing. And I appreciate that D2 is the only steel that they offer. Ontario needs to drop OS8 like a bad habit and move to D2 throughout the lineup. This is absolutely a beautiful thing. That base model is D2 steel, which is a great steel. But the thing is, honestly, in every other way, I kind of feel like these guys are outclassed by the Rats. Because the Rats, to me at least, have better ergonomics, 100%. They have a nicer lockup. I do like having this liner lock here, rather than the very strong frame lock that they've had to put in there, which is not great. The build quality on the Rats overall feels better than on the Avispa and the Zancudo here. The ergonomics are better on all sides, 100%. And although I love the blade on the ESEE versions way more, there's just, for me, ultimately, there's no real question. And especially once they drop a Rat 2 on D2 steel, these can just officially go away. And so that's kind of where I land with these guys, is that they are fine knives. They're okay. They'll work. And especially if you don't have some of the issues I'm having with this little guy, it will be a fine piece for you. But the problem is that ultimately they are up against very strong competition with the Cutjacks in the world, with the Rats in the world, and with all kinds of other really nice knives available these days at $40. I just don't see these guys measuring up. So there you go. That's the final conclusion. They're nice knives, but relative to the competition, I just don't think they're quite nice enough. So I hope this was very interesting, that the review didn't bite and that this didn't sting them too badly, because mosquito, wasp, But mostly I hope that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. I'm going to go bug some other knife. All right. Bye now.